Thank you and welcome everyone. As Natalie said, my name is Rob Riley. I'm an application engineer with Bentley Systems. Today we're going to want to talk about how we use Bentley Navigator to resolve clashes. So just talking a little bit about Navigator in general, some of the new key things about the Navigator CONNECT Edition we're going to work with is that it's got a common interface for all devices. So whether you're working on your desktop, a tablet, or whatever type of tablet you're working with, you're always going to have a similar experience as you work with the software. You can easily interact with the entire model. We can also work on multiple platforms and languages. So we do have a common interface for all devices, as I mentioned, and that includes your desktop navigator, as well as support for the different tablet computers as well. It is touch enabled, so I'm actually working on a laptop today that is touch enabled, and I'll show you some examples of where I can rotate on the screen. Of course, you won't be able to see my fingers moving, but we will be able to see the rotation. So that's just a quick introduction. I want to jump right into the clash detection process, and I want to work with it in two different ways. I want to look at working with clash detection from within ProjectWise, which of course we can do, and also we'll look at how we can do clash detection just from your desktop. So if you're using a shared drive or some other way to access the iModels you want to work with, we can do that as well. So let's just go ahead and jump over here. So I'll start out with ProjectWise, and here I have a model, iModel, that was produced in this case from a MicroStation-based application. And I'm going to go through the clash detection process so you can see how that works. So you can see I can simply double click on a file in ProjectWise, bring it into Navigator, and begin working with it. So if I just look at my overall model here, you'll see I've got my design, and if I want to just rotate this around, I'm actually just using my finger and rotating the model around. If I pull my fingers out, I can actually zoom in and zoom around the model, or even if I hold my fingers on the screen, I can pan. So it's very easy to navigate. So what we want to do now is just go ahead and start looking at how we create clash detection jobs. So here, just go into my clash detection tool here in the interface, and I want to create a brand new job. So here, we'll define what the job is. I'm just going to call this pipe versus steel, because we're going to check the piping model against the structural model and see whether we have any clashes. So we can define what we're going to clash against each other in a couple different ways. One is we can do work with models. We can add models to a particular view, or we can do that by what we call categories in Navigator, but that's actually when you publish a model from, say, Bentley-based product, the levels that are defined in that model are going to come in. If you publish, an Autodesk model, layer is going to come in. But we commonly combine that as categories within Navigator. So what I'd like to do is I'm just going to go ahead and add in the models that I want to work with. And I want to look for my piping model. So this is my piping and equipment. I'm just going to add that to set A, and you'll see that come up over here. Then I'm going to go and look for my tank models. And I've got several of those, and those could be multiple design files that were published as iModels and brought into the design. And I'll add those here. So you can see the two that we have that we're comparing. And what you'll notice is that they're color-coded, so you can easily see which ones are in each set. So now let's go ahead and we'll just exit out of this mode just by hitting the left arrow here. And then I'm going to go ahead and process this clash. I should say clash job. So we'll process that, and we'll see that we've got a number of clashes. If I click back over to clashes here, I can see it'll tell me the number of clashes I have in my job. But if I click over back here and start looking at the different clashes, we can just click here, and then we have a list of all the clashes that are in the model. We can do things like turn off the display of the different components. So one is the background. If I just click here, I'll hide the background and only see the two different components. Of course, we could rotate that around. So using the rotate view tool, I can just grab this little crosshairs, then I can snap to any point on the model, and that's going to allow me to rotate the view right from that view. And then I can click to look at some of the other clashes we have here. I'm just holding my center mouse button down and I can pan. We'll just click down through a few here. So let me go back to the one I want to focus on, which is this second clash in the list. And I want to go ahead and comment on that clash. So something that's new in the Connect Edition version of our clashing tools is that we have the ability to be able to create items against those. So here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on my edit tool over here to the right, and I can now create an issue and define a lot of information about that clash. So I'm going to just say, give this a name, we'll call this pipe slash meme. And then I can, give that a description, I could give it a priority and so on. You could assign that to someone. But in addition to that, I also can do an attachment here. And what I can do is do a screen capture here and mark this up. So I'm going to just go ahead and click the plus sign here. And then with my little camera tool here, I'll actually capture that. And now that's set up on a sheet that I can then begin making comments on. So here I'm just going to drag a bubble around here. I'll make a comment. This could be whatever comment you need, however you decide you want to resolve the issue. And we'll save that there. Then I'll just click the big check mark, and that's going to then be in my my item here. So that's basically the process of defining a class job. So we published models, we defined our clash information, processed the job, and then resolved the clashes. That's the whole process for doing it. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to look at here is I'm actually going to go ahead and create a second job. So we'll create a new one here. And this time, what I want to do is go ahead, I'll just define the same criteria I had. So once again, I'm going to go here. Actually, I want to go to models here. And I'm going to grab my piping equipment, and I'm going to add that to set A. And then I'm going to go to my tags. We'll add those again. And I'm going to add these three in. We'll add those to set B. And what I want to point now is that we do have suppression rules that we can apply to different class jobs you're doing. And in this case, we've got a bunch of rules that are already applied to this. So one of the key rules that's on by default is what we call the suppress touching rule. And what that does is that makes sure that you're not going to get any clashes from things that are touching each other. So of course in a design you have lots of, two different pieces of pipe are going to touch each other, or two diffusers, or I'm not diffusers, but pieces of ductwork are going to be touching each other. Well, we define this touching tolerance, and that's going to ensure that you don't never have clashes of things that are just touching that you don't need. And you can adjust that and make that a little bit more if you want to make sure that you don't pick up those types of clashes. So that's going to limit the amount of clashes we're going to have. So that's looking at one example. So that was doing this whole process from within the ProjectWise environment. But now what I want to do is just look at how I do it from the desktop, which is pretty similar. So basically I'm just going to launch Navigator from my desktop here. And now I'm going to just go into a different model. And I want to go ahead and pick the view that I want to work with. And once again, we can rotate this around and so on. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and define my class job again. So here we're just going to go here. And in this case, I'm going to define it by categories, which in this case is happens to be a Revit model that came in. And I want to define this based on a bunch of levels that came in from Revit. And we're just going to, and it's very easy to use the search and narrow down what you want to see. So I'm going to add the structural steel to set A, and then we'll send the structural or the mechanical to set B. But that's actually just an overall model. So I'm going to choose that for my models. Apply that to set B. And there we go. So now we're ready to go ahead and process it. And once again, we'll see that we've captured a bunch of clashes. So the other thing, and of course, we could then go ahead and apply items to those so they could be resolved. But the other thing I wanted to point out is I'm going to actually create one more class job. Or actually, I can just use this one. So if I go back here and look at my class job, you see that I've got 73 clashes. So now what I want to do is I'm going to turn off that touching tolerance, and we'll see what the difference is if I process the job again. So let me just go here, and I'm going to create a new job. So we'll just create a new one here, and I'm going to go ahead and add in my steel. So we'll get the beams and the columns. Those will go into set A. And then I'm just going to go ahead and grab my HVAC again, mechanical, and we'll add that into set B. Oh, and then if I go to my suppression rule, I'm going to turn off this suppress touching. We'll close that, and then go ahead and run our class job. And what we'll see here is that because we turned that off, different things that are touching in the model are actually being picked up as additional clashes. So that's why it's important to have that particular suppression rule on in the process.
Hey Rob, can you hear me? This is
Yeah.
Mary Kay. We did have a question coming in. We had two actually. And one is, how did you get the rule to auto-populate?
Rule to auto-populate. Okay. So what? Oh, okay. That's a good question. So what we do
says,
is
I'm sorry,
to define.
how did you get the rules to auto-populate in the previous job?
Okay. So there's two parts to that, I guess. The one is that we can populate or add the rules by using the suppression rules option. So let me just look at that real quick here. So I'm just going to go back and edit the job. If we go to suppression rules here, we can add rules based on just by clicking here and then adding those into the job. So we can just add that rule in. I have to find parameters for that. But basically, you just grab those, add them, and now you have an additional rule in here, and it shows up over here as well. I'm going to actually have to check. I think the other question they're getting at is that whether you can have that pre-populated as a template, and I'm going to have to double check on exactly how we do that. Did you have another question there, Mary Kay?
Yeah, there was the follow-up to that was I think what you're getting to is a template, is can you use rules that are already created from job to job or file to file? And that would be
Um,
basically, is it a template you can reuse, right?
yes, yes. So yeah, well, you definitely can use the rules from file to file, job to job. Um, what I'll just have to figure out with the template how exactly we template those. Though.
And can you move it from something from V8i to Connect?
I am not sure. Let's note that one, and I will find out.
Yep. Yes, there's a couple more. Will each project have its own rules set up? Which
Uh, I again, I'll have to check exactly how that works, but I would anticipate that we'll have a template that you can share across projects, and then you would modify that per project.
Okay. That was all for now.
Okay. Excellent. So, a couple other things that are new in the Connect Edition, or we do have a brand new iModel format. Many of you may be familiar with that. But what's really awesome about that is that you can work with extremely large models and work with them effectively by publishing them to iModels. So if you have, a very large plant or maybe a large roadway project, or a high-rise building, any of those, you can publish them from whatever application you're designing those in, bring them into Navigator and work with them very effectively. That the walking and everything should work very well. That brings up another point I wanted to make sure I made, is that we do have the ability to bring in iModels from many different applications. Of course, pretty much every Bentley application you can publish and create iModels. You also can create iModels from things like Autodesk Revit, uh, Autodesk Civil 3D, or any DWG-based tool, as well as many others. So whatever information you need to bring in, we can bring into your iModels and work with them in Navigator. We do support multiple platforms and languages, so we support the main tablet operating systems, and of course on the desktop too in Windows. We support Windows, iOS, and Android for your tablet devices.